Welcome back to episode 3 of the SEO Weekly, where queries are weird, advice is controversial, and everything depends. So much happens in a week. We're talking deep dive articles, Google updates, Twitter threads. It's insane, and I don't know how we're supposed to keep up and put it into one 5 to 10 minute video. Well, I'm gonna do my best. What happened this week? Well, early last week, Brighton SEO happened, and it was this major in-person event on the other side of the pond. And, seriously, Kelvin Newman, I know you like cycling, and I know you like running conferences and events, but, stop stealing all the SEOs. You're basically Carmen Sandiego at the Louvre. It's just like, yoink, yoink, yoink. This event was massive. And if you missed it, basically, Natalie Arney was covering internal linking, Luke Carthy was doing Faceted Navigation, Azim Ahmad was talking about businesses podcasting, Stacey McKnight Inbound PR, Tom Capricorn Web Vitals, Rejoice Ojiaku was doing ASO and SEO, bam, bam, bam. Let's go. Look at that. That's ridiculous. That's so much content. So if you missed it, I can imagine there's a huge amount of FOMO. Don't worry. They are actually doing an online version where you can see all of those live presentations for free. So check that link out in the description. Oh, and speaking of Rejoice Ojiaku, did you know that she started a Black digital marketer community on Twitter via the group chat? So just reach out to her if you want to participate. I'm sure she'll have you in there. It's all facilitated via these private DMs on Twitter. And speaking of really cool communities and initiatives, Arija Bouali has done it again. She's starting the Founders Hub, which is highlighting 50 brilliant women SEO owners, agency owners, entrepreneurs. It's growing, so if you know someone who owns a company that should be on it, it's basically a specialized place where she has cards highlighting these founders, so you have no excuse to bring them onto your conferences to speak, to have them on your panels, to boost their awareness. Another awesome initiative by Arij. So apparently there was an unconfirmed long and finicky algorithm update. Now, it was unconfirmed. It's not like Danny Sullivan came out and said anything. Barry Schwartz saw a lot of chatter on in the forums, the webmaster forums, and on Twitter about fluctuations. And I love these articles where he surfaces all of the various volatility reports from the SaaS tools and shows them all. It feels like this catwalk of like the Met Gala, and everyone's looking at the different outfits, or some sort of kitten parade where you're looking at the different kittens. It's like oh, SEMrush, oh, very nice, very nice. Mozcast looking good. Ooh, Rank Ranger, I like that. AccuRanker, SERP Metrics, oh, both of you looking so fine. Advanced Web Rankings, oh, okay. Cognitive SEO, dash nice. And Algoroo, gotta have the Australian representation. I don't know why I'm comfortable doing an Australian accent, but I didn't try to do the British accent earlier. I don't know. Speaking of Australia, Brodie Clark, who's always surfacing the most interesting SERP results, features that he's seen as he's always scouring what's going on Google, he's bringing back bubble links, or maybe Google is, but he kind of paid attention to it. So what are bubble links, right? In November 2020, you would start to see in the featured snippet internal links in the actual featured snippet. But the thing is, they would actually link out to other articles. Now, this is really problematic if you're trying to get into the featured snippet. And as Izzy Smith pointed out, it's going to put people off, because instead of just winning that featured snippet, all of a sudden you're sharing the spoils among all these different competitors, and SEOs were not too happy about it. So apparently Google got the feedback, and Brodie noticed recently that they're starting to test out a different version. And with this new version, he's noticed that they're only using it for really definition styled links. So, Wikipedia or some other authoritative websites like maybe Investopedia that really isn't stealing from a competitor as much as just an authoritative definition. Other examples are internal links from the site. So if you win the snippet, then you might see an internal link to your own site. One example that he uses is Nintendo. So that's really not as bad. I think this is something that we always need to pay attention to. There's always the issue of zero-click With SERPs, Google's business model, they always want to keep you on Google and provide you information. There's always that debate among Googlers and among SEOs about whether you actually want to get the featured snippet. But the bubble snippet is really interesting. Bubble links inside the featured snippet. The other reason, besides them actually looking like little bubbles, Brody identified when he was looking at the code that it actually says bubble in the documentation, the HTML that's labeling those specific links. So who knew? Bubble links, they're back, baby. So this past week, Sam Underwood, who is an awesome technical SEO freelance writer, he goes deep on some really cool subjects. He has a way of explaining to it. He did his first Ahrefs blog post that he published, and he went into faceted navigation. This is fascinating. I'm sorry, I did it. Luke Carthy presented about it on Brighton SEO. Our own Colt Sleva, SEO engineer for iPullrank, talked about a little bit in his supercharging e-commerce tags and taxonomies. Sam goes all out, best practices, what are faceted navigation, how to use it, how it impacts SEO. And for those of you who don't know, it's basically that whole filter set whenever you're at like a shopping site where you want to choose by, the star rating of the products and the sizes and the colors. Like when you want to get that perfect inflatable pool for your kids in the backyard and you need to make sure it's the right size, you might use that faceted navigation at the right price so you don't get screwed. Well, the problem is faceted navigation can get complex for SEO because it can create these dynamic URLs. Every time you're using it, it's creating like a new complicated string at the end of the URL, and that could lead to a lot of different issues in terms of increased use of crawl budget or diluting link equity. So Sam writes this awesome article that explains how to handle it, how to do it, how to use robots, your robot.txt to make sure that it's following the right directives and making sure it's as clean as possible so it doesn't crush your SEO and your rankings. Do you ever watch those movies like Hackers with Angelina Jolie back in the day, or The Matrix, or even recently Startup on Netflix, and you see a hacker and they're on that black screen and they're doing some really shady code. It's like well, most of the times they're using the command line. Command line is not nearly as shady, especially in the world of SEO. I guess you can do some really nasty things, but Will Nye of Built Visible wrote this really great search engine journal post. If you're getting into technical SEO and learning code, one of the great places to start is with the CLI, the command line interface, and he dropped a lot of the basics, but just most commands that you need to know to be able to do a variety of things behind the scenes. Sometimes it's faster than using a graphical user interface. Sometimes it's just necessary because you don't have access otherwise to the website or the files, etc. So check out his deep dive. I think it's pretty cool. I think we all could learn something from it, especially if you're getting into the coding and technical SEO side of things. In tech SEO land, Sam Torres, the managing partner of the Grey Dot Company, ran a awesome exercise with Women in Tech SEO, where she was looking at all different types of JavaScript SEO errors that were coming up and identifying ways to fix them. She put together a great presentation and video running into issues around crawlability, around things not being indexed properly, working with Gatsby, images, all sorts of things. Check that out. Really good stuff. Ola King of Moz, Whiteboard Friday, Ola dropping it. He was like a boss. I mean, he literally did his Whiteboard Friday about how SEO, the bosses of SEO, broke it down. And it's something that we talk about a lot at iPullrank when it comes to personas and audience research. But when you're content engineering, when you're creating content, you really are creating for three different entities. Well, not entities in the SEO sense, but entities in the sense of bosses. You're trying to satisfy three different stakeholders. And so Ola does a great job kind of breaking down what that means, whether it is the actual business that you're creating content for, the searchers, the people that you are, who are looking for your content and searching those queries online, and the actual search engines, making sure that everything about it, the content that you're creating and your website and the technical SEO is satisfying all three of those bosses. It's a really great explanation breakdown. Ola is awesome. Check him out on Twitter and check out his Whiteboard Friday. And finally, there was another Brighton SEO presentation, and then there was another deep dive that was really worth kind of addressing, and that's Andrea Volpini talked about GPT-3 and automation of SEO. He basically explained the way that GPT-3 works, natural language processing and natural language generation. He talked about all the different options, whether it's like OpenAI, but this idea that you can create a lot of great content using AI systems. He gave some tips and tricks because it's one of those things where it's the input you put in will impact what you get out of it. And so, what can you use that for when it comes to SEO? It could be something along generating titles, generating product descriptions, generating FAQ. And he broke it down in a way that I think is complicated, but it's interesting and it makes it appealing to try it out. In fact, he shared how with a client over the course of 2 months, he basically earned them 2,000 clicks, saved the client over 7,000 in what they would have spent on Google Ads just by using AI to generate FAQs. That also, though, leads into an interesting article that was written by Jake Sheridan. Jake was talking about scaling content using AI, and so it's a very interesting dilemma in our industry because a lot of times AI isn't completely there yet. A lot of the content generated isn't quality, but it does really well for SEO. And so Jake basically broke down 4 different sites that he's pretty sure is using AI to create content. He identifies why it's problematic, and he's like, the writer in him hates it because it's just not always good writing. It's just easy, cheap, and efficient. It doesn't have the human touch. Versus if you just want to make a buck and you want to create, hundreds of thousands of content using, the ability of AI generated content, it's a viable option. So I'd love to know in the comments, what do you think about AI content at scale? Are you for it? Are you against it? This has been the SEO Weekly, episode 3. My name is Garrett Sussman. I hope it's been helpful. I hope it's been informative. Please subscribe to our channel, leave a comment, be my friend. No, this has been awesome. We appreciate you. Thanks for checking it out. And until next week.